All right, welcome back. We just finished example D in the last video, and we put it up here, our pie graph. So on to E. E is determine relative frequency. So here's the advantage of doing the homework and anything from this unit in a spreadsheet, which is it's handy for us that we have access to a computer lab. If I want to move up, I'm going to have to move some graphs out of my way here. So I'm going to insert. The only reason I'm doing this, remember I told you that Quattro Pro is a little bit funny, and I know I want to graph relative frequency. When I look back at the question, I know that F says graph cumulative frequency, and Quattro Pro only allows you to graph two columns side by side. So I'm going to cheat a bit and move it in there. Not really the way it's supposed to work, but I don't want you're stuck with the software. So relative frequency. So relative frequency is the percentage, and if I go back to our note here for one quick sec, relative frequency is the table or diagram that shows the frequency of the data as a fraction or percent of the whole data. So what it's saying is what percentage does each one represent? So using my spreadsheet, I'm going to find the sum. I want to know how many students were surveyed in this class. So I go equals sum, bracket, and I want the sum of this column, bracket. No, I don't really want it going all the way down to 100. There we go. So we have 32 students in the class. Relative frequency is equal to how often something occurred, a frequency, divided by the sum, or the total. Now, a bit of a trick. Just make sure that I made an error there originally. Make sure the sum, it just goes to D10 in your sum. So there's 32 people in the class. Relative frequency equals the frequency Monday births occurred, so that one, that cell there, divided by our total, which is 32, and I hit enter. So the 12.5% or 0.125 people. Now I want to go back here for a sec. If I go to the formula and I put a dollar sign in front of the D and after the D for my denominator, I always want to be dividing by 32, that's the total. If you do this, put the dollar signs on either side of the D and hit enter, what it does is when you copy this formula, which I'm going to ask you to do, copy and then paste, you'll see that at every formula, it's divided by D11. The dollar signs force it to stay as D11. If you don't put the dollar signs in, so don't follow me on this one, I'll just go equals this divided by the total, and I copy and paste, so I'll copy and I will paste. You'll see that there's no, it says that there's a blank cell, okay? So there's no numbers here to divide by because it wants to continue adding 1. It's just the way a spreadsheet works. So if I do want to keep D11 all the way through, if you put the dollar signs in front and back, it tells it it's always dividing by D11, this cell right here, the 32. So it keeps that denominator constant. So I'll paste. So there we go. Now I want it as a percentage, looks a little nicer. So I go to our options here, so selection properties. Numeric format, I would like a percent, and no decimal places. You can go 1, it doesn't matter. So you can see in the bottom corner here it's 12.5. So there we go, it's all as a percentage. So there is our answer to question E. All right, so I will, whoops, all these things going here. I'll just take a snapshot of this for the moment, just to bring it forward. And bring it back to this page. We'll shrink it down. I'll move E up here. So there we go. So there's our relative frequency. And if we are going back a bit here, relative frequency, and now I want a graph of relevant frequency. And again, Quattro Pro or any spreadsheet program makes that task pretty simple once you've got it set up. The textbook, I notice, uses line graphs sometimes. For frequency, I'm not a big fan. I prefer bar graphs with the statistics. But I mean, to each your own. So anyway, so there is our resulting graph, and again, you can go either direction. Notice that the y-axis has gone back to decimals. It's just the nature of the spreadsheet. So just remember that it's as a percentage. So the title again, so relative frequency of days students were born. X-axis is days of week. And I have to go back because I hit enter instead of tab, and then y-axis is relative frequency. And we hit next and finish, create my graph, and there it is. And I'll just move this down, bit of a lesson in spreadsheet tidiness. So there we go. So there is our frequency. I'll make it a little bit bigger, see if I can get the title. Not really. I can go in there and change the font. You got to like Quattro Pro how it won't make it fit. You'd think it would understand to change the font, but you can play with that after. So bringing that forward into my file, just so I have it in front of me. So there is our F. Okay. So we now have F taken care of here. And I get caught up here. Oops. So that was supposed to be an F that I was writing there. It didn't turn out very well. There we go. All right, and our last two, G and H, determine cumulative frequency and graph cumulative frequency. So I just want you to take a look here before we move on. If you look at the histogram, so I'm coming back to the histogram, you see that it follows that shape. My pictograph, and you don't want to really do this to yours, but the pictograph follows the same shape. So that same wavy S. And my relative frequency graph, similarly, follows that same wavy shape. So it's still displaying, it's calculating, or it's shown in different ways, but it still shows the same trend. So what I want to point out there is it doesn't matter what form of graph you end up using with your data. It's more or less picking the graph or the information that best suits the situation. Okay, so G, cumulative frequency. Back to Quattro Pro. Again, I'm going to insert. Again, it's because I know I want to graph it. And the program only likes it when they're side by side. So cumulative frequency. And I'll make that bigger. Okay, cumulative frequency. So the formula that you set up for cumulative frequency, for the first one, it's going to just equal the frequency. So for Monday, it's 4. The second formula, and this is the one that's going to go through, and we're going to copy and paste it, it is how much was on that day plus, so you do addition, the previous total. So you add the 4. So what you end up doing is adding it up, and when you get to the last day, the value on Sunday should be 32 because it's increasing it every day. So when I hit paste, the last one's 32. 10 and 6, sorry, 10, here we go, 6 plus 4, so over here, 6 plus 4 is 10, 10 plus 8 is 18, 18 plus 5 is 23, so it's just adding them all up. So that's my E part, so I guess I can capture that to bring it forward for the note for you, just so you can see. And I go back to my note here, I'll shrink that down, I'll put that in there, so there's cumulative frequency. So when you look back, you can remember how that came to be. And then the graphing part, highlight the section you want graphed. Again, it works better if it's side by side. And again, I prefer the bar graph, not 3D though, 2D is great. And next, the title, so cumulative frequency. X-axis days of week, Y-axis is your frequency. All right, so next, finish, and here we go. So I'll take a capture of that and bring that over to the smart board and bring that over here. Now this is the one graph that looks different from the other patterns. And the difference is that it continually increases because we're just adding the previous total onto the one before that. So G and H. So the spreadsheet, some people are hesitant using the spreadsheets, but I will tell you that the spreadsheet will save you some work, especially with the graphing, because if you're adamant you're not going to use spreadsheets, you're doing these graphs by hand. And I'll provide the graph paper. I have no problem doing that. However, you do have to do the same amount of graphing. So I would recommend, since you have access to the computer, to go ahead and use it and practice with it. You're going to have to use it for the project anyway. So I'll leave it at that, and I will move on in the next video to the next example.